Yeah, so Google is the ubiquitous brand. Everybody on the planet knows what Google is. And when you search for a doctor or a practice, if you say, type in the name of your practice doctor, the first thing you see on the top right of the screen is the Google listing. The picture's there, the whole listing's there. And if you ask for who's the best orthopedic surgeon near me, Google will suggest three listings, call it the three pack. So definitely Google is the most important. So usually for the first 3 to 6 months, we recommend to our clients that they focus on Google and repair any, damage that has been done by neglecting their listings for the past, 15 years. Once Google's where we need it to be, then we start adding in we call them secondary review sites.
Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome back to Scaling Practice Management, the show where we help you grow your practice smarter, not harder. My name is Jakub Grajcar. I'm the head of marketing at Talkie AI, the AI medical receptionist voice agent company. And my guest today is Evan Steele, CEO at Raider8, a healthcare reputation management platform. Evan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How about you, Jacob?
I'm doing very well. As we just mentioned before we hit record, this is the last point on my agenda for the day, and I love recording these, so this is me ending the day on a high note. So that's something that I'm really excited about. And thank you so much for coming on the show. We've got a really cool episode lined up here today. Definitely going to be touching upon reputation management of a practice, and I hope we can bring some value to the watchers and listeners in that way. But first, I wanted to ask you something that you may not have been asked on a podcast before. Hopefully, a little bit of an icebreaker. To get the watchers and listeners to know you more from a personal side before we talk the business side, Evan, could you tell me what is the most fun thing you've done this year thus far?
That is a great question. It's been a fun year, and I'm not going to say anything that's work related. Just came back from a vacation from Wyoming and Montana,
Mm-hmm.
and going
Mm-hmm.
to the Jackson Hole Rodeo was a blast. Memorable
Rodeo.
experience. Yeah.
Okay. So was there bull riding? Tell me a little bit about it.
There was bull riding, calf roping. They had, even little 7-year-olds riding these small little calves. There was really exciting, the barrel racing, where it's the women riders and they have to go around 3 barrels and race back to the finish line. That was exciting. Yeah, it was quite an experience, something you don't see in the New York area where I'm from.
Yeah, yeah, really good. Did you try your hand at any of that?
Actually, when I was younger, I went to horseback riding camp for 4 years. We get our own horse for the summer and go out in groups every day with your group. And, we used to do the barrel racing and do the, roping with a lasso, roping of calves. So we used to, but no bull, the bulls didn't try to, buck us off their backs. But, yeah, I did some of that when I was younger.
That's so cool. That's why I love asking this question, if I'm honest with you. Like in my mind, I'm there with you, horseback riding. Although I've never actually done that. What have I done? I've done bungee jumping once. That's a little bit of adrenaline. Very different kind of experience though. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's putting a smile on my face here. The watchers can see that. The listeners will have to take our our word for it. Very cool. So thank you for sharing that. And in terms of talking a little bit about Raider 8 and yourself, we'll get into that in just a minute. But first, this show has got a tradition, and there's one question that every guest gets before we dive into anything else, almost anything else. And I wanted to ask you that question, if you're ready for it. And here goes, Evan. What is your number one tip for successfully growing a healthcare practice?
My number one tip by far, I used to run a medical practice for 9 years, and I've run 2 software businesses, and it's the same for all businesses. It's focus on customer service. So I think people forget I think marketing is, put up a digital ad, working online reputation, put up a billboard, print an ad, but really the best marketing is word of mouth, strong word of mouth. So if you could keep your patients supremely happy, they're gonna tell their friends, "You gotta go to this doctor's office," and that's gonna grow your practice tremendously, I think more than anything else. So focus on patient satisfaction.
I really like that. And would you have anything to share in terms of, in this day and age, what do you think is the most important to try and bring that patient satisfaction up to provide great customer service?
It's all the staff. I always say, like, I own a software run a software company. The software is just, you could put it on a CD, right? If no one does that anymore, but a thumb drive, right? and that's it. It's a bunch of ones and zeros, but really the soul of the company is not so much the software, it's the people, right? And who you hire and how you treat your customers. I always ask, somebody, "Would you rather have" it's an interesting question, I get different answers, "amazing support and mediocre software, or mediocre support and amazing software?" And a lot of people, especially in healthcare, because in healthcare, there's, issues with software vendors are legion, across the healthcare landscape. So yeah, so just, providing a great experience for the client, from a customer service standpoint is really, really important. So I think that's really important. Now, if you have great software and great staff, then it's a win-win. Then you got really something good going. Yep.
So, am I getting it right that you're in the camp of better to have mediocre software but amazing support?
Yes, I'm in that camp, although we definitely try not to have mediocre software.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But it's just to show how important a high level of service is to clients.
I'm curious then, because you've been, in leadership roles for a long time, of course. You've built more than one company. So what would you have to say then about building company culture? Because I think you would agree that affects the way, for example, the support team works, to a large extent, right? So I think that's one of the toughest things to crack, in a leadership seat. What have you found works in that respect?
So one competency that's super important, and this goes back. We actually had a name for it at my first company. The first company was called SRS Health. It was a electronic health records company. We would hire ETPs, and ETP stood for eager to please. So people who are eager to please, just like you know those people. You're at a restaurant. Somebody wants to just make you super happy, get you everything you need, and they're eager to do it. It's not like you feel like somebody's doing you a favor by helping you out. They really wanna help you out, and that's a great competency, and we look for that in our employees. So what it does, it creates an atmosphere not only for our clients, they're eager to please and make our clients happy, but also internally at the company, we wanna help. They're just helpful people, so we wanna help one another, and that just goes a long, long way to creating a super healthy culture where people are supportive of each other and want to help each other rather than the opposite, right? Where not everyone's pulling their weight and then there's all sorts of infighting and whatnot. So we hire and fill our ranks with eager to please employees.
That's really cool. And it's cool that you had like a whole acronym for it. And I definitely do agree. Some team members coming with a, how should we call it to not make it sound negative, efficiency mindset? How little can I get away with, I suppose, but this is the opposite, right? How much can I do? How can I go above and beyond? Did you check for that in any way in the recruitment process? Was there like a question geared towards that?
It's more of a feel, just as you speak and interview, you could get a feel if somebody's in eager to please, and also when the interview is over, it's almost a lost art these days. But does someone follow up with a letter or now an email, right? Do they follow up with an email saying, thank you, right? Again, that's a lost art. That always gives somebody an edge in the interview process if they simply say thank you for the time in the interview.
Yeah, so much goes into that impression. I once had a conversation with a CEO of an American agency actually, and he said he would almost prefer if, for example, there was a recruitment task that somebody, if they didn't meet a deadline, that they would just communicate about it clearly. I was supposed to turn in that recruitment task for Tuesday. Something came up. It's going to be Wednesday. That clear communication throughout the process. That's also part of the impression, as much as, or alongside what you mentioned, the additional follow up. Nowadays, there's so many ways you can leave a voice message on LinkedIn, for example. There's so many ways you can do that. That's cool.
I learned something from my old CTO where he says, when you regarding communication, when you're emailing back and forth and you email someone and they explain something, you have a question and they explain it, but then you ask for clarification. If there's more than two back and forths, pick up the phone and solve the problem, right? Just going back and forth by email is just not working. So I keep that kind of rule in the back of my head. I always often just pick up the phone or do a quick Zoom call if it's taken a while, too much back and forth with something.
I find that the most efficient people definitely do that. They push for the call, they want the conversation, they want to kind of feel the nuance, also feel the feelings around a certain topic, because sometimes what's in the email doesn't really go into the underlying issue there. So Evan, I wanted to ask you, you've already alluded, and kind of let's fill that part in before we get into the rest of the conversation. You alluded to your previous companies. We obviously introduced you as CEO at Raider 8. So could you take us briefly through the history of what you've done thus far, your background?
I started out my career in banking. I went to business school, and I was one of those Wall Street investment bankers, worked for a Citibank, Citicorp, and then a now defunct firm named Bear Stearns. Um, 10 years, 15 years before they went under, but I worked there, and it was not what it cracked up to be. Being in banking is just, 80-hour weeks. I think everybody you worked with was either single, divorced, miserable, like everyone's working so many hours, and I just couldn't, enjoy, or that wasn't what I wanted to pursue eventually as a career. And so my brother had just graduated fellowship from a pediatric ophthalmologist, the ophthalmology fellowship, and started his practice. And he was super busy running all over the New York metro area, like a chicken running around, the expression, like a chicken without a head. I said, "I'll tell you what, Mark, I'll leave banking and I'm going to run your medical practice, and you just see patients." I did that, and it was great. All right, working with family away from the banking business. And a few years later, we had a lot of paper charts and 4 offices, and charts were all over the place, right? In doctor's trunks, a patient would come in one office, the charts in another office. It was a big mess. So we wanted to, this is late 90s, we wanted to get rid of the paper chart problem. So we hired a programmer and started a company called SRS. So the R is the programmer's last name, and the 2 Steele brothers, SRS. And we created this program. It was great. It solved all the paper chart problems that we had, all the digitized everything, made everything accessible, it changed everything for the practice, made us much more efficient. And so we ended up going to conferences and selling the software at conferences. So you fast forward to 2012. So this is 97 to 12. So 15 years later, we had over 5,000 doctors, over 20,000 users on the platform, and that's when we sold the company. So that was the first company. It was kind of like I started because necessity is the mother of invention, right? We had a problem with paper charts, we solved it, and then we sold the solution to other doctors. Fast forward to my wife and I were traveling. We were checking into a hotel in Prague and got a really, really bad check-in experience. The guy's name was Federico, and
You still
Federico,
remember his name?
yeah, in fact, the little mascot over here, this little bee guy,
Are you kidding?
he's our mascot. He's Federico. Anyway, bad check-in experience. I had no way to rate Federico, and I said, "You know what? I wanna rate check-in staff, and since I'm in the medical field, let me rate check-in staff, at medical offices." Even when I was running a practice, I didn't know if the patient walking into a satellite office was getting that art of the warm welcome, right? Do we have ETPs at the front desk, that will do anything for the patient, right? So it all ties in. So we created Rate or Rate, and the first thing we did is rate people, and then we added questions and benchmarking. So now you could say, my bedside manner, how does it with the doctor, and how does it benchmark against other doctors in the United States? And then, the data was great, but my brother said, I love this software, but my competitor down the road has more Google reviews than me. So that's when we built our reputation management piece. And this goes back to 2017. So it's been 8 years. And, surveys are patient feedback surveys vital to a practice, but more or less banal in terms of product class. Like it's just surveys, right? People look at it that way. Reputation management has been a hot product in healthcare for a long time. So um, even though our DNA is that survey and patient feedback, and we're really good at it, we market ourselves as reputation management, more specifically, healthcare reputation management. That's just focused on healthcare entities.
Okay, that's a really interesting story, and I love it how you have a very specific point at which you wanted to pivot towards Raider 8, meeting Federico. Federico's gonna live rent free in my mind now for a little while. So definitely the topic that I wanted to touch upon with you here today is reputation management. And I wonder, every time I record an episode, I imagine an audience of practice managers, right? That's what the show is about. It's scaling practice management. What would they want to know about reputation management nowadays? And I think the first question I would ask you is, what's the bleeding edge in this area? Because they are gonna know what reputation management is. We don't need to go through the basics, right? But I think it's always interesting to explore what are some things that are possible now in reputation management that some practice managers might not even know about.
Unfortunately for us, a lot of people look at it as a commodity. Oh, I just build online reviews on Google. It's anything but a commodity, so that's the one message that I would, wanna convey. Think about it. If you're a 20-doctor practice and each doctor has 2 Google listings 'cause they practice at 2 different locations, that's 40. And then there's Healthgrades, Vitals, WebMD, so that's another 20, 40, 60. So now I'm at 100 listings, and then there's Facebook and some location listings for the practice. So you could very easily start scaling up and getting over 100 listings to manage. And how do you manage that effectively, right? There's hundreds 100 URLs you gotta put into a system. How do you know which review sites to build reviews on and which listings need the review the most? Is it the doctor's Google listing, the location listing? Is it the Facebook listing? Is it the Healthgrades or Vitals or WebMD listing for the doctor? So what we've done uniquely in the industry is completely automate that. Practice sets goals for each type of listing. So like Google, you're gonna want more reviews and higher star rating than, let's say, Vitals or Healthgrades or WebMD. So you put in your goals, and then our algorithm, when the patient's ready to leave a review, boom, algorithm kicks in, a lot of math goes on, and then all of a sudden the patient's sent to the review site at that moment that needs the review the most. So that's unique. It's fully automated. No one has to think about it. And as a result, you get better results because you're building a balanced online reputation. So when you look up a doctor online, you're gonna see the Google Healthgrades, Vitals, WebMD, everything looks great from a patient's perspective, and no patient is sitting there saying, "Why is there that 2.8 star on Yelp or on WebMD, but a 4.8 on Google? I'm gonna look at that 3.8 or 2.8 stars listing on Healthgrades and see what's upsetting patients." So anyway, the idea is to build a balanced online reputation automatically behind the scenes, hands-free, without any manual intervention.
So one thing that piqued my interest there is you mentioned that, in an automated fashion, you're suggesting the best moment to grab a review from a patient. But could you speak to that? Like in your experience, and as I imagine you have a lot of data on this, given your scale, what seems to be the best time to try and gather this review? What seems to be the best way to?
So this it's interesting. It's an interesting question. If you prompt the patient within minutes of leaving the office, we find, and we do that, and the great response rates, high 30% response rates. Um, we found slightly, I mean, not even like just like a percent, like a tiny bit higher response rate if you ask patients to post a review the following day, the following morning. I think the calculus there is patient's busy, they get in their car, they're on their way back to work or home, they gotta go pick up something at the store, that not a good time to post a review when and you hit them up right at that point. Whereas if you wait 24 hours and the next morning, their busy day going to the doctor is done, and they have more time to fill out a review request. But either way, we like the real time. It just, if something's fresh in the patient's mind, they could provide that immediate feedback. But either way, but once you start going out, let's say you send out a review request a week later, you're sharply decreasing your response rates and your effectiveness.
Okay, and in terms of ways of collecting this, I mean, I imagine, there's this balance, right? On the one hand, you want to get a comprehensive review. On the other, there's the quantity of reviews as well. What does your data tell or your experience say about, the way of requesting this review?
So we have email or text. You're talking about the email text. Text has a much higher response rate than email. I think that's just people get a text and they respond to it. A lot of there's more and more junk text, but there's a lot more junk emails, and emails get lost. So we like to text the patient first, and if the number bounces, it's a landline number, or we don't have a mobile number for the patient, then we'll send an email. But we prefer text over email.
Okay, that's interesting as well. So one thing that I was curious about as I was thinking what to ask you about during this episode is how the activity of reputation management changes as the scale of the practice changes, right? Because you could be looking at a 3 doctor, 5 doctor practice versus a 50 doctor practice or like chain of locations, right? So, what would you say, in terms of when you're just starting out, what are the most important bases to cover versus, the way this expands into other areas, other types of listings as you grow? Could you give us like a rough timeline of in the beginning you should care about X, but then Y becomes more important?
Yeah, so Google is the ubiquitous brand. Everybody on the planet knows what Google is. And when you search for a doctor or a practice, the first thing, even in Poland, or in any city in any world, if you say, type in the name of your practice doctor, the first thing you see on the top right of the screen is the Google listing. The picture's there, the whole listing's there. And if you ask for who's the best orthopedic surgeon near me, Google will suggest 3 listings, call it the 3-pack. So definitely Google is the most important. So usually for the first 3 to 6 months, we recommend to our clients that they focus on Google and repair any, damage that has been done by neglecting their listings for the past, 15 years. Once Google's where we need it to be, then we start adding in we call them secondary review sites. So Healthgrades, Vitals, WebMD. Rate from the surveys we give, we have our own listings that are very effective, just much like a Healthgrades, Vitals, WebMD. So those provide a lot of reviews. And all of this ties into, and we could get to AI and what the AI engines are doing now. So anyway, so it's just a process, and it's the same for a 1 doctor practice, you said as you scale, or a 100 doctor or a 300 doctor practice. It's the
Right.
same thing.
Everybody cares
Yeah,
about Google.
yeah,
Right.
fix your Google problem first.
And then what becomes important later on? You mentioned these more specialized listings. Is there another layer to this? Something that, when you've got larger scale, multiple locations, what comes into play?
So, again, I think it's for let's say a 3 doctor practice with 2 locations, it's the same exact hierarchy of Google, location listings, doctor listings, the secondary review site listing. It's exactly the same for 2, 3 doctors or 300 doctors. There's really no difference. The only thing that's different is when you get into hospital systems, they'll have an extra layer. So they'll have the brand, right? The big healthcare system, the brand, and they'll have service line listings. So let's say Banner Health, Banner Health, right? Then you have Banner Health orthopedics, ophthalmology, primary care, urgent care, right? So you have the different listings for each service line. Then you have the doctors, and then you have the secondary review site listings. So it's almost the same as a regular medical practice, except they have that extra layer for the brand.
So I think that covers the base of where to look at, which platforms to look at, which platforms to pay attention to. I think another question that would be on the minds of practice managers here is, obviously or not, what to do about bad reviews. Collecting reviews is one thing, and you can't necessarily impact what happens at the practice. But there's always the question of how do I react when there's a bad review, or there's a number of them. Is there anything that you've seen works in your experience and your data for managing that? Because that is also part of reputation management, right?
Yeah, you have to respond to the patient, especially for a bad review.
I see.
So, me as a customer, if I'm thinking of going to a restaurant or a hotel or a doctor, and I see you always sort you want to read the bad reviews, right? So you sort and you read the bad reviews. If a patient's complaining and then the practice says, "Oh, we're really sorry about this. Call us up. Here's our number. You want to help rectify your issue," I'm thinking, great, right? This practice cares. So even though they got a bad review, this practice cares, right? And that makes a huge difference. So right away, we provide the tools to respond either um, by just typing something. We have templates based on star rating, and we also have AI generated responses that are HIPAA compliant that the practice could use. But you got to respond, especially to the one star. And when you respond, as soon as you respond, the patient gets an email saying, "Oh, just got a response from the practice manager." And as if, it's like when you're at a restaurant, when a manager comes over to your table and apologizes, you feel a lot better than if nobody came over. It's the same thing. So you're gonna make the patient feel somewhat better about the issue, and it's a service recovery option for a service recovery opportunity for the practice to turn the patient around and make them feel better. And once in a while, a patient will go in and upgrade or change their review to, from a 1 star to a 3, 4, 5 star. Right? So yeah, but that's a further benefit. And then lastly, you find if a practice isn't doing anything, it's the upset patients that are posting online reviews, right? So a patient is peeved, they're gonna post a 1-star review. We find that when you typically don't do anything for reputation, online reputation, you get about 20% of your reviews in 1 star. That's 1 in 5. When you actively work with a company like Rate, that percent goes down to between 1 and 2%. So 1 in 5 reviews are 1 star just organically, when if you're doing something, it's 1 in 50 or 1 in 100 reviews become 1 star. So, the positive reviews vastly outweigh the negative reviews and give a positive, you know, convey good feelings and trust to the patients.
So to ask you, if you'll excuse me, a pretty basic question, but this is a problem that you've solved. It seems like you're solving it at scale, right? There might be, hundreds, thousands of these negative reviews going through your system, probably more. And you're mentioning that you've got templates for responding to negative reviews, that you're now applying AI to this problem. So what would you say you found that really goes into a well-structured response to a negative review? Obviously, you want to be empathetic, but, could you get into the details a little bit here?
So the details, it's an interesting word that you use. You really can't use details from a HIPAA standpoint. And it sounds weird, but you don't want to use the patient's name. So even though the Google review will have the patient's name, you don't know if that's the patient. It could be someone using someone else's name, right? Jacob, you could be Bill Clinton, on Google, right? Nobody knows for sure it's the patient. So and if it is, we don't wanna use the patient's name. So you don't wanna say, "Jacob, I'm sorry to hear about this experience." That's not HIPAA compliant, believe it or not. You also don't wanna mention anything specific about the encounter, like to admit that the patient was actually there. "I'm sorry you had a problem with your colonoscopy procedure, when you visited Doctor Smith." You don't wanna say that. But you do wanna keep it generic. So, "We are sorry you had a poor experience. Please call an office manager," or even the name of the manager at this phone number. That would be appropriate. So something less detailed and more generic, but with a call to action. "Call me up and we'll help you out."
So there's this offer of additional time, additional care. You can reach out to us at this number. You can get in touch with us, get heard about your experience. And so that what goes in there in terms of like trying to please, going above and beyond.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. So we already touched upon AI. I think this is an interesting next stop for us to go. You said something that that piqued my interest. I can see, based on what you already said, that there's a place for AI in the reputation management game and the patient satisfaction game in general, right? How do you see AI interfacing with this part of running a practice? Where do you think using AI will be appropriate and seen as a positive, and where do you think it might be seen as a negative, and how might that change over time?
So it's interesting what's going on with AI. So Google's used to be a search engine. You search for something, and the search would be, "I need article," and then they give you a list of articles or sources, and you click and you read something. Now, well, I'm gonna use patients. Patients or consumers, are looking at Google or any search engine as an answer engine, not a search engine. They're looking for answers. So when I say, "What is the new tariff rate between the United States and the EU?"
Trending topic, yeah.
Trending topic. Um, it's not gonna give me an article that from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal that talks about the tariffs. It's gonna summarize, it's gonna give me the answer, so I don't have to go and click in, right? It's the same thing with reviews. We're seeing more and more now, just do it yourself. Just type in, "Is so and so, doctor," first name, last name, Dr. John Smith, a good doctor? And people are looking for that answer. So Google then it starts pulling, or is ABC Orthopedics a good practice? Or show me some ABC Orthopedic reviews, right? So instead of reading all the different review sites, Google's compiling these AI overviews. And what they're doing is they're pulling from, Google pulls from their own listings. They pull from Rater Rates, verified review listings online. They're pulling from Healthgrades, Vitals, WebMD, US News, all the review sites, and putting a summary up top. If you're not doing anything for your online reputation, that summary is gonna look ugly. It's not gonna look good. Remember, when Google sees 20% of comments are 1 star, it's just gonna not paint as nice a picture as when 98% of comments are 5 stars, right? So it's becoming really, really important to be able to provide visibility online in a structured manner of your patient's comments, patient feedback, so the AI engines could read it answer questions that patients are asking more and more. Super important. And so you ask for an upside and a downside. Upside is if you have a lot of good reviews, your AI overviews are going to look great. If you don't, then the downside is your AI overviews are going to look terrible, and you don't want that.
It becomes much harder to manipulate, doesn't it? You really need to take a look at, across the breadth of the web, what are people saying about you and what you can do to address that. It's no longer enough to just have, a strong position in the key listings and then the others are kind of going to fall into, page 2 where nobody looks. It's more, it's more across the board these days.
And when Google and ChatGPT makes these summaries, they actually cite the websites they're using in the summary. And it's all the usual suspects. It's all the places where you want to build those reviews, and it's not just one place. So that's when we talk about, you start with Google and you work your way to the other review sites become more and more important because Google's pulling from them to provide overviews and answers to patients.
I am tempted to ask about something that you said earlier that made me nervous, to be honest, right? So let me paint the picture. You talked about, because, beyond reputation management, there's patient satisfaction in general, right? You mentioned part of the patient satisfaction, a good patient experience is, making the impression, and not just the impression, but also following the rule of being eager to please. So now, I'm looking at Talkie, a company where we provide something that's been seen negatively for a number of years, which is, you call a practice and instead of a human, a machine picks up, right? However, that's changed in the way that it's perceived in the sense of, well, not maybe not perceived, but in the way that it works. These machines used to be really rigid and it was, the kind of voice detection wasn't quite there. Nowadays, something akin to a ChatGPT agent picks up, more advanced, more specialized, but it's still not a human picking up. And do you think, how to phrase the question, do you think there's a positive place for an AI like this, a voice agent picking up instead of the hold tone, right?
100%. So, and let me give you an example. So, talking to somebody, conversational AI is the same as typing AI. It's just you're talking, it's changing the talking into words and putting it into some, AI model. And then the text is coming back, but it's coming out as voice, right? There's some more nuance to it because when we're talking, conversational AI, like when you go, uh-huh, uh-huh, like when you're listening, like it's those little verbal cues that you don't get yet that they're working on, and that's getting better and better. But basically, conversation. So just to use a chatbot, we use something called rippling. Rippling is a full-blown human resources payroll system, human resource management system, learning management system, applicant management system. They do everything, right? And their knowledge base is quite deep. So our head of HR, she used to have to call up and wait on the phone. They had good support and they would do Zooms, but now they have this AI chat and I think she told me like 8 times out of 10, she'll ask a question, it'll respond, ask another question, it'll respond, ask another question, and then back and forth, it'll give you the answer. Think about it. There must be 30,000 pages of training material that an individual person that no one could learn, master perfectly, and the training would just take years to get somebody who knows the whole manual. And here you just feed it to some AI model, and now they're trained and they're providing these accurate answers. Like it's astounding how effective that is. So to be able to just call an airline, right, or call a medical office, get someone on the phone, or have a conversation, not wait on hold, and get a good answer, whether book an appointment, or you have a question, it might not be here now, but it just like that chat that's being used in Rippling, the conversational is gonna develop very rapidly, and there's gonna be a time where we're gonna be able to have those conversations, and patients are gonna be more than happy. I think the worst thing that we see in our surveys is getting someone on the phone in a medical practice. We see that problem all the time. If that problem could go away, and instead of having 3 call center people, you could have 1 and then have AI agents, and then if it becomes real sticky, a sticky situation, then you get transferred to a live person. But I that's it's just bound to happen. I'm convinced it's gonna happen.
I mean, you're saying bound to happen. It's really funny how you've described a lot of what we've already built here at Talkie. Some kinks still to iron out, but our agents do that. They answer the questions and can schedule appointments depending on kind of the system they're integrated with. So it's interesting to be hearing about something that, is on the horizon, but actually, in a large extent, already here.
I have a friend who's works for a conversational AI company for healthcare. And he said, "Try it out." So he patched me into their agent. He gave me the names of some doctors that are in this test. And I was talking with this agent and, asking I asked about directions. I got an appointment. It was really cool. And again, things are improving at an accelerating pace, right? So if it's like what I experienced, if it's like that today, I can't imagine what it's going to be like even 6 months from now. It's great.
Yeah, it is great. It is great. And it's great to be, on a personal level, part of the team building one of those solutions is actually really exciting. When you get product demos, I'm smiling. But anyway, enough about that. We're rapidly running out of time here, as often happens with interesting conversations. So I guess the last thing I would ask you is, if you were to look a little bit further in the future and coming back to the area of reputation management, right? Right now I've got these AI overviews. What do you think is even further in the future for reputation management? How do you think this is going to change over time and what's next there?
I look at different technologies, starting with the printing press and the whatever what is 14, 15, or whatever it was, for the first time, you could publish something and people could read and understand what's going on in other areas in Europe, right? There's the printing press. To me, the telegraph for the first time, somebody in California could know exactly what's going on within seconds of something happening in New York, right? Like that was like a massive shrinking. I think of all those different amazing technologies, the internet is another one of them. AI is one of those, and it's a big one, right? And it's just changing the way people find information, right? And we all want information about doctors and we want information about medical practices. So our development efforts are centered right now on these. We have something called RAVE, Rate Visibility Engine. How do we make patient feedback as visible as possible to the internet? It used to be just SEO, but now it's GEO, right? Generative engine optimization. So now it's GEO, and how do we publish and make the data visible, patient feedback data visible, so that when patients are looking for information, they're going to find all this feedback online in neat little summarized packages. So just doing that and optimizing it and testing and seeing what works and doesn't work, that's consuming a large part of our development efforts.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I feel like there's even more to explore here. Maybe we'll be able to do something of a follow-up session or something else in the future. But for now, I wanted to leave you a little bit of room to talk to the watchers and listeners, because that's the questions that I had for today in terms of exploring reputation management. Thank you. I learned a lot personally from what we discussed. For this last part, could you tell the watchers and listeners where people can find you and follow you? Is there a newsletter they can sign up for? Anything like that?
You could just go to info@raterate.com if anyone wants any info. Obviously, we have a Raterate. You can see how it's spelled right over my shoulder. Raterate. Just raterate.com, and there's a contact us form. You just go to demo form. There's many different ways to get information about Raterate. It's pretty easy, and we're very responsive.
Last question I would ask you is, let's come back for just a second to this audience of practice managers, hypothetically in our imaginations in front of us, right? What's one last piece you would leave them with in terms of something they should start doing, stop doing, think about as we close off this episode? What should we leave in their minds?
Stop asking patients for reviews. Stop using QR codes. They don't work, or they work in a very minimum way. You give a QR code to a patient to post a review. Stop stop using a software that's not designed for healthcare. I talked about all the complexities of the listing structure in healthcare, whereas AutoZone or Starbucks, they have basically like a Yelp and a Google listing for each location. So it's very straightforward. They don't have all those the whole hierarchy of reviews I was describing before. And so stop using we call them like a big box vendor, a software that's just built for every industry, not just for healthcare. And then one thing, sometimes people say, well, managers or marketers say, I need to fix up my Google listings and make them look good. And I need to do that first before I build online reviews. And I always say, what's worse than having a listing that's not perfect? And what's worse than that is having a listing that's not perfect where you're not building reviews on it, right? There's no reason not to start building reviews right away. So it's something that's easy to do. We make it easy because of our automation. It's easy to do. And it's just, in today's world with a lot of liquidity and where people are living because post-COVID, people are moving to different cities from one city to another. They're landing in a new city, and they're searching and they're tech-enabled, they're younger, they're searching for doctors. They're searching for the best dermatologist or the best primary care doctor. So it's just kind of table stakes. It's just like SEO was important, and has been important for decades. Online visibility of patient feedback online is, likewise super important.
Thank you for adding that in. You used the phrase there, big box vendor. I'm gonna steal that because in our own marketing, we also talk about, specialized versus non-specialized AI agents, right? So, and I never heard that expression, and it's a nice one to use, for a point of comparison. All right, great. So that's one last piece of inspiration for this episode. We're gonna finish off here, unfortunately, but still, Evan, I would like to thank you so much for coming on the show. This is a great episode, very informative, and I can't wait to get it published. And as for you all, watchers and listeners, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'll see you in the next episode of Scaling Practice Management. Meanwhile, check us out at talkie.ai if you're curious about AI voice agents for the medical front desk. And that'll be it for today. You all, everybody, have a good day, good night, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whichever part of the 24-hour cycle you find yourself in. That's it. See you, everyone. Bye bye.